This happened when I was in school. It was the summer break. I always loved going to see my cousins. During the time off from school, my family and I always went to visit them, as they only lived in the next town over. I was really looking forward to seeing my cousin. He was a little bit older than me, but he was always up for playing games with me. Unfortunately, he wasn't around, so I had to play by myself. I didn't mind playing alone, since my cousin's house backed onto a forest with a small mountain. It was so great, it was always fun to be had, like looking for bugs. So I decided to go exploring. I really wanted to go to the top of the mountain by myself. So I set my sights on the summit and I started marching up that hill. But then I noticed a dirt path leading off to the side. I was curious to see what might be there. I noticed that there was an abandoned looking house down there. I immediately thought this would be an awesome place to make a base. My cousin would love it. So I decided to get a little bit closer to it. I was so excited that I had found that place. I crept up close to the exterior of the house and I peeked in for a broken window to see what was inside. I saw something so weird that it will stay with me for the rest of my life. It was all decayed in there, but there was a chair that looked brand new in front of the chair with these life-size cardboard cutouts of famous people. The way they had been placed made me think that someone had deliberately set them up. Around the chair there was a baseball player cutout, an anime one and an actress. The way they were positioned around the chair was almost as if they were in conversation with one another. It looked as if it would have been easy for someone in the chair to be the center of attention. The house was a mess, broken glass and the walls were chipped and damaged. Yet the chair and the cutouts were new. It was off-putting and kind of creepy. My gut told me that there was something wrong here. So I decided to go back to my cousin's house. My skin went cold despite the hot summer day. Something innate had woken in me and was telling me to leave. Instantly I began to scramble back up towards the mountain path. And that's when I noticed something in the house. I had gotten up the dirt road and I had more of an aerial view of the cardboard cutouts in the house. One of them stood out to me. It was moving by itself. For some reason I didn't run. I was fascinated by it. I stood there watching cold sweat amassing my brow, not sure of what I was witnessing. I looked closer and my heart paused for a moment when I realized that there was a man hiding behind the cardboard cutout. I could see his arms and legs, but not his face. As soon as I figured out it was a man, I ran as fast as I could back to my cousin's house because I was young and I didn't understand what happened or if I would be in trouble. I kept this incident to myself. If I hadn't noticed the man in there, or if my gut instinct was off that day, I might not be alive to tell the story. I mean, who knows? I was close to walking in there. Now I'm older. I've had time to think about how strange this situation was. What's the purpose of those cutouts? Were they to lure people in? Maybe not people, but young people. Did the man tell naive children that they could meet celebrities? If they followed him to the house in the wood, then what would happen? What would he have done to them? I still think about this from time to time. I'm in a band and over the last few years my band has enjoyed some relatively big successes. It meant that we could leave our small town and start playing some major shows in cities. In the last year or so I have taken up permanent residence in Tokyo and I'm loving it. Trust me, I'm not living like a rock star. The opposite. I'm staying in a tiny apartment. But hey, a small room in the big city ain't too bad for me. The rent is cheap too. For about half a year now I have suffered with insomnia. The reason is because someone has been messing with me dead in the night. Someone opens up the mail slot to my apartment door when I'm in bed. If it's not that, there is always someone stood outside my kitchen window peering into my room before you ask. I've tried many times to see who it is, but I can't ever seem to get a good look at them. And, to be honest, at first I thought it was a hallucination or some kind of dream. Around this time I managed to scrape together enough spare cash to buy a car. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cheap Bentley. One night I had heard a huge bang come from outside the apartment block. I went down to see what had happened. I walked out into the parking lot to see that my driver's side window had been smashed. Not only that, someone had thrown milk all over the seats. It was the height of summer when this went down and it was already starting to smell awful. I was completely dumbfounded. Where was I a target? Maybe the guy who lived here before me had some enemy's pranks getting out of hand with the kids nearby. Perhaps whatever it was, I needed police intervention. I called the cops right then, and their police officer came out and he interviewed me. He swabbed for prints and inspected the car. He didn't find anything. I went back to my room after filling out a report. I was exhausted at this point and I just wanted to sleep. I found the room doused from wall to ceiling in milk. There was a note lying on my bed which simply read, "Next time it will be gasoline." I called the police and the same officer came back. More reports were made. But this time the officer asked me some probing questions about my friends and family. I mentioned that someone had been staring at me through the letterbox in the kitchen window. He looked at me annoyed. Perhaps I should have mentioned this sooner. He said that he would be on patrol over the coming days and nights and he would do his best to keep an eye on the apartment. After he left, I tried to clean a little, but I decided just to get some sleep. I put my mattress and pillows by the door, the only area of my tiny apartment which wasn't wet, that I tried to get some sleep. Someone banged on the door. I woke up angry thinking, what now? It's the police. The voice said it was the voice of the officer from earlier. I hoped he wasn't going to ask me to fill out another form. I opened the door and he was stood there with a woman. He had her arm behind her back. He was obviously restraining her. "Do you know this woman?" he asked with a stern look on his face. I took a good look at her and said, "No, I don't know her." The moment I said that, she tried to attack me. She bared her teeth at me. I've never seen eyes so hateful in my life. According to the officer, this woman was poised with a lighter in hand, trying to set my mattress on fire via the mail slot. After he interviewed her, I finally found out why I was being harassed. She was super crazy about my band and she had come to a bunch of my shows. I hooked up with her one night after our band played a gig. I was drunk. She had seen me not long after that night with another woman. And this is where the resentment and hatred started, as it was kind of my fault. I didn't press charges. I still don't know if I did the right thing there. Anyway, humans are far scarier than any ghost story. Thank you. Thorin. This happened a couple of years ago in Tokyo with two college friends. Mount Takao is a mountain located in Hachioji, Tokyo. It's a popular tourist destination. You can access it from the city center. There's a cable car which takes you up the mountain and you can get some awesome views of Tokyo in the summertime. There's a beer garden too. But this story happened on a cold December night in the off-season. The cable car wasn't active and there was no sign of people around. So we headed up the mountain trail without breath fogging ahead of us and our torches in hand. There was no purpose in mind. No idea what we were doing. We had a few beers on board and we just wanted to go exploring. Looking back, it was all my fault because I said, as we were passing by on the street below, "You know what, guys? I haven't even been up that mountain yet." To which my friend replied drunkenly, "Well, we'll change that tonight." I regretted bringing it up. The trail to the mountain was freezing cold. The muddy ground was hard with ice. Even though we had our beer jackets on and our actual jackets, we were still cold. The biting wind was relentless. After about an hour of climbing up the mountain, I had enough. It was a stupid idea. So I said to my mates, "Guys, who wants to turn back?" I turned back to get a look at what reaction this would provoke, and I saw their red faces and runny noses and I knew what they would say. "Yeah, we look like idiots," one said for sure. The other agreed. So we started heading back down the mountain, slipping as we went, laughing at our idiocy. We were in good spirits, though we were making memories. One of my mates slipped on his ass on the way down and we broke out in raucous laughter. We stopped laughing in unison when we saw torchlights coming towards us. Apparently there were other idiots interested in climbing the mountain tonight. As we were getting close to the entrance to the mountain rail, it was narrow. We were about to share an intimate moment with the owners of those flashlights. I noted 5 people in total. I counted their torches. They looked to be of different age ranges and genders based on their heights. As we got closer, I noticed that they were all wearing face masks as well. I guessed it was a family, but I couldn't sense any intimacy. They walked together, but in silence. I was about to say hello, but none of them seemed like they wanted to make eye contact. They passed us with their heads down. That's when I noticed something. All 5 of them had a large black plastic bag in hand. Weirdos, I thought. As we passed, my friends seemed to share my opinion, because they stopped and turned to watch them climb the mountain. We stood there in silence and watched them disappear into the dark shadow of Mount Takar. This encounter slipped my mind soon after. It was only a few days, or maybe a week later, when I was suddenly reminded of it. I received a link from one of my friends, who was with me that night, to an online news article. The news was a partially skeletonized corpse had been found on Mount Takar. I shuddered when I read the words. The corpse had been cut into 5 pieces. I called my friend and we spoke about the probability that we might have been on the mountain when that had happened. He remembered those people we passed and asked me if I thought they had anything to do with it. For a moment I didn't know what he was talking about. But then it came rushing back to me. There was 5 people wearing those masks, going up in the middle of the night in the off-season, holding a black plastic bag each, and the fact that they didn't want to give any of us eye contact. We spoke about it for a while and we could only assume that we must have passed a family with something to hide. I stay here. Hi, Timur. Fun fact. As you're listening to this, I will probably be going up the very same mountain. I'll let you know if I find anything. Since I was a kid, I'd always wanted to drive. And when I was in school, I wanted to be one of the first of my friends to have their own driving license in a car. I worked a part-time job in high school and I saved every penny I made. And I was set on my goal of getting that car. When I got around to the second year of college, I finally could afford my own car and I passed all my driving tests. I was unbelievably proud to own my own car, even though it was a second-hand car. It was a sedan and it was a bit of a dinosaur. Hybrids were coming out in newer cars at better gas consumption rates. But I didn't care. I worked hard for that car and I loved it. Even if it was a gas guzzler, I was okay with not having the most popular car amongst my friends. I got ripped on by some friends for driving an old man car. But hey, they didn't complain. When they needed a ride, I always drove safe. By the way, I didn't want to damage my car or lose my license. I didn't use it all that much in the beginning. I don't know why. Maybe I was nervous. Anyway, after about half a year, I got used to driving alone for longer periods. I remember one night I was feeling more confident than usual. So after I finished my shift, I dumped my things at home and took my car out for a long solo drive. This was at about 10 p.m. I had no destination in mind and I was happy. As long as there was a road ahead of me. I went through residential areas and down roads I hadn't been down before in my town. It was pretty cool. I was finally enjoying the sense of freedom I always thought I would have by owning a car. And that was when I heard it. There was a dull thudding sound coming from behind me. I was worried that I had ran over something. It sounded like something had happened to one of my real tires. Maybe I accidentally rode up onto the curb. No, that wasn't it. While I was considering the options, I heard the sound again. It was the same dull thudding sound coming from the same place behind me. So I pulled over at the end of the road and I got out and checked and I couldn't find anything wrong with the car. The tires were in great condition. Next I checked the trunk and all the maintenance supplies. I hadn't fallen over. I looked into the dark trunk and I felt something strange. I have no reason as to why it felt strange, but it just did. The empty, dark, white trunk was staring at me and I felt something similar to nausea. Time to go home. I thought I shut the trunk and I hopped back into the car. On the drive back it felt like someone was staring at me from back there. I didn't use the car for a couple of days because I was busy working and I had tests at college. When the tests were over, I got a call from one of my friends asking if he could come out for a night drive with me. He said he would even pay for the gas. I remember the weird thudding sounds and the strange feeling of being watched. Last time I had gone for a drive and I hesitated for a moment. But then I told myself I was worrying about nothing to go out and enjoy driving with my friends. I picked my friend up in front of the train station. I was wondering how far we would dare to drive that night. The night was rich with possibility. He got in and we were driving along, talking about nothing in particular. We were just joking around and having a laugh. I was wide awake and enjoying myself. I could see us staying up all night. I set the satellite navigation to avoid toll roads and we just drove wherever the roads took us. After a while I realized that my friend had gone quiet on me. I asked him if he was feeling carsick, since we had gone through a few winding, dark roads. He said he wasn't feeling carsick though. Then he asked, "Is everything okay? You know, with your car?" I was curious as to what he was inclined, because in my mind, when you ask someone if everything's okay with their car, you're kind of asking, is everything alright with your driving? Well, that's how it felt. There was nothing wrong with my driving or my car. I thought the engine and the brakes were in great shape. I replied, telling him I just recently had the car serviced and there were no issues. He then surprised me by saying, "It's just, I keep hearing this banging sound coming from the back." I said to my friend that I had heard some noises coming from the trunk before. He seemed a little worried, so I said we would pull over and take a look just to put his mind at rest. I was sick of these noises at this point, so I was more than happy to show him what I already knew. There was nothing in the trunk that was out of the ordinary. Still, when I opened the trunk, I felt that strange, dark atmosphere that leaked out of there. The air suddenly seemed cold and unpleasant. My friend pulled out a small flashlight attached to his keychain and he illuminated the trunk. It looked as I expected. All the maintenance things I had in there were still in order and not toppled. "Oh, look, there seems to be something wrong back here." His face was painted a ghastly shade of white. He shone the torch all around the trunk. "That doesn't look right. Looks like something's leaking, man." He said. I was confused. There appeared to be some sort of leak. The gray interior of the trunk had now turned dark reddish-brown color. It didn't look like an oil leak, and I know I'm not a professional, but I have never heard of an oil leak in the trunk before. My friend looked me in the eye and asked, "Is that blood?" I had no words for him. It sure looked like it, but I knew that it couldn't be possible. I didn't say a word about it. I just said I wanted to go home. All the while I felt that same uneasy feeling of someone looking at me while we drove home. I can't imagine what my friend was thinking. I didn't even exchange any words with him. The atmosphere felt so heavy. I put the car on the market after that, and I was grateful to quickly find a buyer. There's something off with that car. What was it used for in the past? Who was the previous owner? What happened in the trunk? All questions I would love answered, but I know I'll never get those answers. This is a story about something seriously weird which happened to my grandfather and I way up in the mountains. My grandfather lives in the mountains and goes foraging for wild, edible plants and vegetables deep in the forests. It's a part of his everyday life. Ever since I was young, every time I would visit my grandfather, I joined him on one of his expeditions. This happened when I was with him deep in the mountains when I was in the first year of high school. I believed that what happened to us was either a glitch in the Matrix or we were spirited away. They say in this region of Japan a lot of strange things like this happen on the mountains. I was always way more excited than frightened to go out in the mountains with my grandpa. I only had the chance to go foraging with my grandpa once or twice a year, so we always made the most of it. We would set off early in the morning and journey deep into the forests of the mountains, and we would usually head back around lunchtime. But this time we did. I didn't say anything. I just took my grandpa's lead. Now my grandpa is an expert when it comes to hiking, so we would move at a fast pace. We started to go deeper into the forest. Did we go this far last time? I wondered. As I tried to keep up with him, I started to get a bit freaked out. He was silent, but that wasn't unusual. He was always quiet on these trips into the mountains. I was getting freaked out. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Because when I spoke to him, his responses were short. "We're going further into the forest." I asked, "It's fine." He replied I was worried, but I had done this so many times with him. I just followed and trusted him. We kept going deeper and deeper into the woods. No matter what, he didn't slow or stop. I don't know how he did it because I was tiring and he was a senior. I was getting really tired and I wanted to turn back. I was literally chasing after him at this point. I didn't want to leave him there. Before I knew it, my grandpa was approaching a cliff edge. It was so sharp I had to react fast. I grabbed him. He tried to shake me off with all his might. Luckily for me, he was getting on in years and I managed to overpower him. He was hell-bent on walking forward. I grabbed a flask of water from my pack and I doused his head with them. I wanted him to break free of whatever trance he was under. He looked so shocked and disoriented he said that he didn't know where he was. He had never been this far into the mountains. We managed to walk back towards a place which he recognized and he slowly began to come back to his senses. We quit foraging that day and just headed straight back to my grandparents' house. I was greeted by my mother there. I have never seen her look so angry. She glared at us and then fell into a loud song. I thought we'd only been in the mountains for a couple of hours. But can you imagine my shock when my mother said that we had been missing for 24? She had created a search party in our absence. The police had been called and the neighbors were out searching. And everything seems that something is happening on these mountains. I cannot account for my lost time or why my grandpa kept walking. I think about it sometimes and I have a fear that something was calling him. Maybe we got to the place he was called to. Maybe that's why we have over a whole day accounted for. I don't know what happened to us. But I'm just glad my grandpa and I came out of it. Okay. Thorin,